Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really delighted to be here at Occulture for the first time. It's such a pleasure. Topic of my talk today is the cult of Mithras, but I'm not going to address the social and cultural background of the cult. That said, it's worth reminding ourselves that from the 1st century till the 5th century CE, independently financed and administered units of this cult operated from Hadrian's Wall in Scotland to the deserts of Syria, and from North Africa to the banks of the Rhine and Danube. In Rome alone, there were at least 500 Mithraea. All of these esoteric mystery cult centers were self-financed, self-administered, and continued a tradition for 400 or 500 years. Let me see if I can. Okay. What I want to talk about today is just to address two questions. One, what was the nature of the experience conferred by initiation into the mysteries? And secondly, what was the ritual process to enable them to do that for so many centuries across a vast period, vast geographical extent? So I'll just start with this iconic image, which most of us immediately associate with the cult of Mithras. It's worth saying that we should separate the two elements of this iconography, the god and the bull. Now, the bull occurs, the earliest occasion I can find of the bull being sacrificed, if you like to say that, is in the Epic of Gilgamesh from around 2000 BCE. And it occurs in the episode titled The Bull of Heaven, in which Enkidu and Gilgamesh set out to destroy the Bull of Heaven who's wreaking havoc on earth. It's not an image of sacrifice, okay? To jump on the back of a bull and attempt to stab it in the shoulder is going to make you the sacrifice faster than you're going to sacrifice a bull. So this image would never have been recognized as one of sacrifice in the ancient world. This was not how it was done. The god, or a god named Mitra, occurs in the Bronze Age in Sanskrit, Avestan, Hittite, and Mitanni. And that commonality suggests that he emerges from a Proto-Indo-European origin or cultural strata. One other point that's worth recognizing here is that the stabbing of the bull in that area is generally seen as taking place in the region of the sky dominated by the Pleiades. Okay, so it was of central interest and importance to the cult's sense of itself. And we find the Pleiades feature in the star law of hunter-gatherer societies. At least 85 to 90% of the studied hunter-gatherer societies recognize the Pleiades as an important element in their worldview. So again, this imagery is coming to us from a vast depth of time. And so the question arises is how do we account for its continuity and its continued valence today? So I very quickly just want to say that mystery cult iconography generally breaks down into just 4 elements. One is the mythos of the deity, because a mystery cult is always the mystery of a specific god. A belief system generally wound around the notion of metapsychosis and of a subtle element of our being that continues from life to life. A ritual process based on the mythos of the god. And finally, certain psychophysical events that accompany the process of mystery initiation. Now, I'm just going to borrow this schema from Philippe Descola, as a way of guiding us to understand the structure of the iconography. And briefly, naturalism is the way in which we normally construct our understanding of any iconography in terms of representation. And indeed, naturalism is often called representationalism in a visual cultural context. So it includes standard elements of symbolism, allegory, and metaphor. But that's not the whole story. In any pre-modern culture, there's a far wider domain of meaning implied by an iconography. And you may even say that in a postmodern world like ours, it's returning again. If naturalism tells us what an image means, animism tells us what an image does. And in the context of a mystery cult, the iconography is an extension of the deity itself. It is an active element. The problem that we have in modernity is that we've long lost the habit of treating iconography in this way, and we tend to experience iconography in shattered remains in museum exhibitions. But if we're to understand what it is that the cult was doing to address this question of what was the nature of the initiatory experience, we need to repair our vision, so to speak. So we'll start off with this standard figure, or it's the Modena Phanes figure, a very famous figure that manifests the Orphic cosmogenesis. And briefly, from water arises mud, and from mud arises a great drakon or serpent named Heracles Kronos, who gives birth to a cosmic egg, which through the force of its own energy bursts asunder, and a bigendered figure steps out, known as Phanes, who is pure illumination. Now, this figure condenses so many levels of meaning in itself that we need to deconstruct it to see how it functions within the context of a mystery cult. And here's the first step. Basically, the iconography is now transferred to the lion-headed god. And in the act of transfer, it not only remains true to the original, but it accrues to itself a very unique form of energy, a fierce energy. And normally it's rationalized by saying it's all-devouring time, but it's more than that. It is the energy itself, the energy that's going to fuel the initiatory process that's being depicted. And we can see that development here. The lion-headed god now enters into a performative perspective in relation to the cultists. For those of you who work with energy and initiation, you'll recognize that in the fiery breath, the mechanism for conveying the initiatory current. And that's exactly what's depicted here. It is almost a depiction of the lion grade of the Mithras cult in action, so to speak. Stepping back, let's run at this again from a slightly different angle. What we're after is the psychophysical dimensions of the experience of initiation. The first step that we take then is this statue of Mithras, actually from Hadrian's Wall, I believe, shows Mithras now in the role of Phanes. And you may well ask yourself, what's the connection between the two? Clearly, the iconography has been forwarded, so to speak, to include Mithras. And what's depicted here is the notion that a mystery cult operates something like a prism. So if it takes the pure light of divinity and splits it into its various frequencies, each of those frequencies can be thought of as a deity. So that possession by the deity allows you to recover the originary and unifying source of light. So that Mithras is one of those frequencies. But again, the image has lost something of its power, of its energy. So we see it in the next articulation, where the notion of emergence, which started with emergence from the cosmic egg, now becomes emergence from the rock. And the important thing about this image is the coiling, sensuous winding of the serpent. And for those of you who work with Kundalini, with the serpent power, or experience that in ritual context, this is a direct representation of the psychophysical experience of initiation and most ritual work. The question left unanswered with this particular statue is, of course, emergence into what? And this very rare relief actually gives us an answer. Mithras emerges into a zone with a sleeping god. The ram, I understand to be a reference to Capricorn, which was thought of in the winter solstice and as marking the gate of the sun whereby souls ascend. The sleeping god is Kronos, the demiurge. So this metaphoric relief tells us that the experience for the Mithraic initiate is one of entering that golden age of complete peace, harmony, but with an ecstatic energy. And I think that's what they've tried to convey here. There's one more example of this that we can look at, where it's clearer that clearly the initiate is emerging in the shape of Mithras into the realm of the demiurge Kronos. And he's saluted by the former torchbearers who normally accompany the Tauroctony, who salute him in his achievement. There's a brief text here. It's from Plutarch, but it contrasts the titanic passions of Kronos with the state of infinite repose that he enjoys in the state of sleep, in that suspended state. And what I believe they're trying to convey is a state of non-dual awareness. And the basis for my asserting that is, of course, cross-cultural ethnographies of initiatory states. I'm thinking particularly of states like those credited to the Vajrayana tradition and other traditions. So our second question, therefore, is what kind of ritual process enabled the emergence of such intense ritual states? And to guide us, we have the just about surviving frescoes of the Capua Vetere, Mithraea, south of Rome. These photographs were taken in the late 60s, early 70s, so I'm not even sure that the frescoes are in this state anymore. The original photography by Martin Vermasaren and then Stanley Jastrzemski has disappeared. I was very fortunate to find high definition images that were held privately in order to be able to share them with you. And what we seem to have here is a sequence in which a naked initiate, blindfolded, is being thrust forward. And if you consider the fact that all the Mithraea were independently founded, financed, and administered, they needed to have some entry procedure, which was quite unlike the sanctuary-based mystery cults where you had a permanent priesthood. So the adaptation to this scattered organization of Mithraism required an induction process. The second fresco appears to show the initiate who you can just make out the initiator is trapping his foot with his own foot, so that the ritual gesture, so to speak, speaks to the Tauroctony, the bull killing, so-called bull killing scene. And he is sprinkling water on him. So I've called this the lustratio or lustration scene. The third scene is clearer. The initiator is wielding a flaming torch towards the blindfolded and bound initiate. And the final scene is from the mains or carnuntum vase. Again, it shows the pater very large, who's about to fire an arrow towards the initiate, who's depicted small to show their lesser rank. But the entire scene is undergirded by a powerful serpent. So it's taking place, like all of the ritual scenes, on a profound energetic level for which the physical actions are just a corollary. Okay, so it's like the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. The real action is invisible. So just what I'm going to do shortly is show you a series of reconstructed images for this ritual process based on this ethnography. And just to explain it, this is the mosaic nave from the Mithraeum in Felicissimus in Ostia. And it shows the 7 grades read from left to right. The main thing is, following Manfred Klaus, I've cut them off after the first 3 grades. In other words, I don't believe any mystery cult is an ascent through 7 steps of initiation. The whole point of a mystery initiation is to directly place the initiate in the domain of the demiurge, not into some celestial or planetary intelligence at a lower level. To do that, they have these 3 phases: induction, purification by water, purification by fire, and then the succeeding 4 grades are sacerdotal. That's to say, they have far higher demand on the administering officers than are placed on the initiates themselves. So using this schema, we can see the 4 initiations, 3 preparation. 1 is the teleste, or the actual initiation, in which the initiate becomes possessed by the deity, because possession is the foundation or bedrock of our spiritual evolution. And the mystery cults are simply an evolved form of that. But the major ritual of the Mithraic cult was the convivium, the sacred banqueting, which would be an ongoing part of the community's practice. What I'm going to show you now is a reconstruction of those ritual steps. I've used AI to generate a series of images, and I have all the ambivalent feelings I'm sure you have about AI. But what I wanted to do is to reappropriate the artistic style that the Catholic Church appropriated to itself to feed our pagan Renaissance. So the induction features the initiate blindfolded, naked, which AI will not let me do, thrust into the community. And the point of this kind of hazing style initiation is purely to eliminate the prop of the socially constructed persona, to allow space for the construction of an initiatory body. And the way in which that starts to be realized is by this ritual, the sacramentum, the swearing of an oath of fealty to this community, to this deity, and of course, swearing of an oath of secrecy, sealed by this handshake. And indeed, the Mithras were known to each other as syndexioi, the people of the handshake. So we pass on now to the first stage of purification, lustratio, which would introduce an initiate to the rank of nymphos. Nymphos, of course, is a feminine word with a male ending. Okay, so most Mithraea were positioned near a spring, and therefore they often channeled a small amount of water to run through the Mithraea itself. So using that water and given that initiation to the grade of Venus, the water is appropriate. This kind of fits in with the existing frescoes from Capua Vetere. The first act would be to deposit mola salsa on the water. Mola salsa is simply a powder made from dinkel or spelt, an ancient form of wheat, heated, ground, and mixed with salt. And it was one of the most primitive of the Roman religious practices. For all offerings, mola salsa was deposited, and the person acting as the priest covers their head. It's always a sign that a ritual process is being enacted when you see that. So that the water is sanctified, the initiate is brought in wearing a flamium, which is the veil that a Roman bride would have worn, and then they would be stripped. Again, they would perform this ritual naked, and the initiator would pour the sanctified water around them. At this stage, they're ready for what I would consider the first major ritual, the purificatio, conducted by the lion grade, which would bring them to the grade of soldier or miles under Mars. The first step then again is the purification of the flame, the deposition of mola salsa, tending the flame, lighting the torch. The initiate is brought in, is bound, okay, and then what they're trying to enact here is a ritual that was known in the Hellenistic ocumen as myasis, as it's an energetic initiation that cleanses the familial and ancestral karma and repairs the energy body to make it a suitable vehicle to achieve union with the deity. And at that stage, the initiate is ready. We don't know the interval between these various steps. So you can conjecture whatever you like, but this is now the main ritual whereby the pater of the community, the father, himself needs to be possessed by the deity. He needs to have that day-to-day familiarity with the deity so that when he comes to this critical stage in the initiation process, he can convey, he is contagious with the energy of the deity. Okay? And that refers us back to the iconography we saw earlier, the sinuous windings of the serpent. We need a very toxic and very potent level of energy to perform these rites, so that the pater then will string an arrow. The initiate is now unbound, not blindfolded. He is confronted with this, and on an energetic level, he becomes possessed by the deity. In other words, he experiences, if only for a momentary period of time, non-dual awareness through merging his awareness with that of a deity. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention.